I'll tell you what, if there's one thing I should thank Jordan Peterson for, it's bringing the crazies out of the woodwork and getting them to expose what it is they really believe, so I can have it in black and white exactly their thought process to laugh at. This, How Jordan Peterson Repackages Alt-Right Ideas as Self-Help, by Mark Hill of Cracked.com. The left is getting their political commentary from their comedians because they can't say anything that doesn't make people laugh. Cracked.com are going to go after the person that they describe as the most influential public intellectual at the moment. So point number 5. On the surface, his positions seem fairly typical. He had a career as a psychologist, his big bugaboo is privilege. It's all an evil lie, and worse, it's a postmodern Marxist lie. Yes. Just nothing is a refutation there, that's true. It's a cruel fact of nature that some people are inherently smarter and more charismatic. The men and women are fundamentally different. What? Is it not? What is it meant to be if that's not true? I'm pretty sure that's true. Come on, dude. Criticisms of, say, a white man's success in business stem from jealousy. Jealousy leads to violence, and violence destabilizes society. Well, you did go on about the $80,000 a month he makes on Patreon earlier on in this article. Why did that come up? What's that got to do with the arguments he's presenting? You do seem to reek of jealousy. A lot of you, in fact, seem to reek of jealousy of Jordan Peterson. He doesn't like the fact that Trudeau was supporting a murderous equity doctrine because he praised women's rights. It's not. He praised intersectional feminism, didn't he? Which is an equity doctrine. And equity doctrines, as the 20th century showed us, are the most murderous of all of the doctrines. Just being honest, they're the worst ones. The idea that we can make all people equal, I mean, you seem to think that that's an actual possibility. So, just saying, when he says radical left neo-Marxist types are placing ridiculous demands on traditional society, well, he's not wrong, is he? You don't think it's kind of ridiculous that less than 1% of society can make demands that get other people thrown in jail? I'm just saying, it seems that there is a distinct imbalance of power here, and it's being abused by one side and not the other. 4. He makes these views part of a strict moral code. Okay, that's terrible. Is it? Having a strict moral code? What's wrong with that? So he helps people, as you say here. They describe 20-year-old describe himself as a shell of a human with no future until Peterson's words energize them. Well, that sounds really useful. Sounds like he's actually connecting with people on a level they understand and is actually helping them to improve their lives. I'm just saying, that seems like a good idea. I mean, I'm not an expert. What do I know? I'm white and male. So he addresses 12 rules for life, which I have to admit I haven't actually read. It's written in a ham-handed style that frames every act as an epic battle against a chaotic universe. Well, every act is, isn't it? Just a small battle against a chaotic universe that's so big it can have many small battles within it. Just a thought. Many of its arguments are dubious at best. Oh yeah. He says we'll just hand wave all of the arguments that he's making and all the scientific evidence, because, as he says, none of that matters because people have found genuine life-changing value in it. A lot of people. His young white male fanbase is eating up his argument that privilege is nonsense, and this is the best bit, because many of them are in fact struggling. Ta-da! They're not privileged, they're struggling. Privileged people don't tend to struggle. That's the point of having a privilege, is that you don't have to struggle. Your life is actually easier for you because there is no struggle in your way. And you're pointing to these straight white men and going, wow, they're really struggling. It's going to be difficult to persuade them they've got privilege. Yeah, you know fucking shit. It's going to be difficult to persuade them they have privilege. They're like the bottom caste of society at this point, at least in my country, probably in America and Canada too. It's like unbelievable that you can find people who are actually failing and have to work harder and harder and harder to achieve, while there are literally races and genders in my country that are given a fast track to success on the basis of what they are, while the actual people who have to work harder and harder and harder every fucking year are just laughed at for complaining about being racially sidelined. It blows my mind that anyone can not give a shit about this. I mean, if it was the other way around, like, I would have been such a staunch abolitionist, or like women, women's votes and things like this. I would have been so in favour of that. But this is just the opposite kind of bullshit. This is just oppression from the other end. from a bunch of vengeful activists who literally think that it's okay to hate your oppressor, and therefore, white people, am I fucking right? Men, am I right? And so when you're struggling, the kind of melodrama of everything's a great battle to keep the dragon of chaos at bay is a kind of melodrama that genuinely helps. Okay, great. So Jordan Peterson actually has a way of motivating young white men out of the struggling position they're in, despite the white privilege they apparently possess. It literally doesn't matter how white privileged they are. If they're struggling, it's not helping. It's not change. It's not the benefit that you think it is, because you're pointing at them and saying, wow, they're really struggling. But that's what makes Peterson so compelling and so dangerous. The two biggest talk points of his fans are Jordan Peterson saved me, let's continue to better ourselves, and diversity and tolerance will annihilate civilization and send us back into a dark age of chaos. Okay, how is that not true? These are both great statements. Jordan Peterson saved me, let's continue to better ourselves. If you need help and Jordan Peterson helps you and you're like, right, now I'm going to sort my life out, that's a really good thing. That's just a net benefit to the entire world. There's a knock-on effect where everything gets better when people start making themselves into better forms of human beings. As in, they work on themselves, they improve themselves, they learn, whatever. And diversity and tolerance will annihilate civilization and send us back to the dark age of chaos. Yeah, that honestly, there's a reason we call you regressives. You seem to be anti-enlightenment zealots who do think returning to a kind of neo-feudal era ruled by moral outrage and ethnic purity is actually, not just ethnic, but, you know, like gender, sexuality, all sorts of wild purity spirals on the progressive stack. Like, if you think going back to that age is better than liberty, then you are just wrong, and you are going to destroy liberal civilization. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for 50 years, but that's the trajectory you are on, to end the civilization that we currently have. That's your goal, and you're very open about it. You call it a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, and you're like, well, we want to tear all this down. We want to get rid of this civilization. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I don't want that. I don't want you removing white men from history books just because you hate white men. I don't want you defacing statues. I don't want you closing down or preventing people from holding office at university because of their race, or being hired for media because of their race or their gender. And I don't want that kind of society. I don't want a society where these arbitrary characteristics, innate characteristics that are basically unchangeable, matter more than the action and the moral choice of the person who is actually being dealt with. It is so imperative to me that we don't move into the kind of society that the regressives want, that I will genuinely consider it to be a destruction of classical Western civilization if these people take over. Because, I mean, listen to this. It's almost impossible to separate his moral code from his politics. Coming from a fucking left-wing publication, that's really ironic. Given how that's literally the personal is political. Everything about your life everything about your politics is a moral code. That's the problem with socialism. It's a moral philosophy masquerading as an economic system. It's the same with everything about intersectionality. It's a moral philosophy built on the idea that someone's suffering and it's someone else's fault, and that we should hold these people to account by literally hating them and hurting them and disadvantaging them in any way we can, and it's justified to do that. It's an awful moral code, and it's all bound up with the politics of progressivism. The idea that you would say as a criticism of someone else, well, your politics is just your moral code, and you can't separate these two things. Fuck off, dude. So why should you care? Peterson's arguments are a fascinating study in contradiction. Oh yeah, go on, set this one up. Because he sincerely empathises with young men who feel downtrodden, while also dismissing calls for empathy from others as being a part of a Marxist scheme to send them to a death camp. No one's suggesting you shouldn't be empathetic to non-white people, to non-male people, etc., etc. What we're suggesting is that we shouldn't oppress young white men just because they're young white men, because a bunch of racists really hate these people. I know it's hard to envisage a future where we don't hate young white men, but I think we can do it. I think that together we can move forward into a future where we're just a bit more positive and not so much a bunch of whiny victims. Scratch the surface of most right-wing talk show guests, and you'll find a long history of racist jokes and slurs. They're charlatans whose grift can be exposed. because they told jokes. Are we going down the James Gunn route? James Gunn is a pedo. Dan Harmon is a pedo because he made jokes about paedophilia. Are we doing this? I mean, I think it's worse to be a pedo than a rapist, and it seems that after Rianne Johnson deleted like 20,000 tweets, you might have a few pedos on your side. I guess that explains all the push for normalization of paedophilia from like Salon.com and the Huffington Post and places like this. Looking forward to that P in the LGBTQIA double plus P movement. Peterson's worldview is ugly. Interesting use of a subjective and sort of pseudo-moral term. It's a personal subjective taste. He's not saying that Peterson's wrong, or that he at all, in fact. He's saying he just doesn't like it. He doesn't like looking at it. He doesn't like thinking about it. It's ugly. He finds the aesthetic repugnant, but it's not wrong. But he's great at calmly explaining it while his opponents come off as shrill. In a video that got 9 million views, one interviewer kept misrepresenting Peterson's views. Peterson kept politely correcting her, and Peterson's fans ate it up because it confirmed everything he's ever told them about how people who argue for equality are actually just scammers trying to trick you. Wow. That's amazing. In the middle of her doing it, and everyone's seen it. The reason that went viral is because it just confirmed what everyone has experienced from social justice warriors. And Kathy Newman blundered into it and did exactly the wrong thing. And yes, Peterson nailed her on this. And yes, it does seem that many of the people who argue for equality are actually scammers trying to trick you. Some of them are actually openly malevolent. Yeah, it really seems like you guys have a real problem with your movement. And you're literally saying that people who are struggling are privileged. I'm not saying that you're arguing in bad faith. I'm saying there's something wrong with your reasoning. And number one, in the how Jordan Peterson repackages alt-right ideas as self-help, I just want to say we haven't seen any evidence to support this title. There is nothing in here that suggests that he is repackaging alt-right ideas as self-help at all. But the case they've been making against Peterson clearly isn't working. It's cathartic to make fun of Jordan Peterson, but also when you mock his fans, it plays right into his argument that the left is trying to silence all dissent by portraying anyone who disagrees with them as uneducated bozos. Well, yeah, that is... you're literally... Some writer for Cracked is saying that a guy with 3 degrees and a doctorate knows less than you. And I'm not saying that he does or he doesn't. I'm sure you're a very, very well-educated man. But I'm just saying you really do this all the time, and that's why it's so funny when you try and do it to him. And this is how it ends. Remember what Peterson has done and others can do. He established a template, a worldview that sells common sense discipline. Okay, why does that need to be sold to people? It seems that there might be a lack of it floating around. And self-improvement and conservative politics in one package. Okay, so not alt-right then. The Conservatives are not alt-right. Self-improvement and conservative politics. So it's not about alt-right ideas. It's about the fact that a centre-right conservative is just whipping your asses in the court of public opinion because he keeps demolishing in debate after debate after debate to the point where you people don't know what you're talking about. And you're defending this position like a religion. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. What matters about it is that you feel good. And so you have to defend it, and you have to ignore all of the contradictions, all of the failures, all of the bigotry, all of the and just open harassment, sexual predators, and disgusting avenues that you start unlocking. You have to ignore all of this and say, no, it's Jordan Peterson that's the problem.